Well, good morning, everyone. This is the League of Women Voters Warrant Review. My name is Diane Proctor. I'm the chair of the Town Government Committee of the League, and it's a pleasure to welcome all of you. I want to begin by saying thank you for those who are attending this morning, for those who are willing to present and enlighten us on the way in which the warrant articles are being presented at town meeting. And secondly, to urge you to look and view on our website the warrant review from April 7th. One of the things we discovered and have discovered as we've reviewed various articles is there have been some adjustments and changes in many of them. So viewing those recordings will keep you up to date and ready for the town meeting in an alert way. I want to begin this morning by commenting on the DEI article number 10. You should be able to see in your in the chat box some information. And Tanya, are you here right now with us? I feel like somebody who's a soothsayer. You know, are you in the room? So Tanya is not as allowed us to just put this in the chat box. You'll see that the DEI Commission will present the survey results, which were referenced at the last warrant review on April 19th, Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. And you'll see an opportunity to figure out how to view that agenda, and the results will subsequently be posted on the DEI website of their survey. So I hope that information is helpful for all interested and involved in that particular discussion. And then I also want to explain why we did not discuss Article 19 last time, and that's the Concord Public Schools capital projects, fields, and landscaping. They are waiting to see, they meaning the school committee and the middle school building committee is waiting to see what the bids are, the final bids for the middle school building. But unfortunately, guess what? They don't arrive until about 3 days before town meeting. So they have to see if those bids incorporate the fields and the landscaping. And if they do, then they will no longer move that article. So, and if they cover a great deal of it, but not all of it, they may apply to the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, for additional funding to complete that particular project. So that's the reason we skipped 19 last time. So thank you, and here we go. We're going to start with Article 25, and actually that's the CPC, and I'm the chair of the CPC, so I'm going to present it, not because it wouldn't be good to hear alternative perspectives, but they're really right now, this is just an information session. And so let me start also by saying that 27 and 28 will be on the consent calendar. They're rather routine presentations. So I'm going to now try to do some screen sharing, and I think I can. Okay. Now, can you all see that? Whoop, just disappeared again, so I'll try one more time. Sorry. Can everybody see that on their screens?
Yes, Article 26 coming through.
Terrific. The CPC Article 26 appropriations are for open space, open space and recreation, affordable community housing, and historic preservation, and some administrative costs for a total this year, a robust total this year, of $1,839,680. You can see that it's rather evenly distributed between open space and recreation, community housing, which is almost always affordable housing as we speak of it, and historic preservation. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly because unless I hear questions about them, I think we'll all see that they're pretty routine in the sense that there's nothing controversial about them. There is one on which I will stop. The Regional Housing Services Program has been something that the CPC has supported again and again. This is the work of Liz Rust and her amazing team. And for them, we recommend $33,000. The Aspet River Bluff Housing Project is one that was begun last year and is now starting to really develop. There is a 2-family home on that project, and that is the first thing they're going to do. They're going to be working on preparing it for the eventual a pair of condominium for affordable housing designation, and then they're going to help to get the land ready for the other 3 affordable houses on that project. The Bruce Freeman Rail Trail project. This has been Marcia Rasmussen's baby. She's retiring this year, as you all know, and this will probably be the last of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail project contributions from the CPC. But it's to provide additional amenities to enrich and enhance the user experience of this non-motorized, ADA accessible, multi-use trail. And there are some safety improvements, and in particular, there is an effort to try to honor the Concord Prison Cemetery site adjacent to the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. There's been some fantastic work done on that particular effort. Open Space and Recreation Plan. This is something that is done every 5 to 7 years. And we're ready to do that again. In order to receive funding from the state, it's very important that the town renew this process. And this is under Delia Kay's fabulous leadership, and it's for consultation services to assist in the preparation of an update to Concord's Open Space and Recreation Plan. Warner's Pond Restoration Project. Now, I'm going to stop on this. This is Article E in the CPC. And the town of Concord has requested $550,000 to improve the ecological health and recreational opportunities at Warner's Pond. For those of you who've had an opportunity to attend the public hearings on the Warner's Pond, we're in a situation right now where dredging that pond, which had been the anticipated goal 3 years ago when the CPC began funding this undertaking, has become so prohibitively expensive in the multi-millions of dollars that is no longer considered to be a feasible approach to the pond, both for fiscal reasons and for ecological reasons. Therefore, they are looking to do one of 3 things. Let the pond just be and see what happens. If that happens, the eutrophication would take over and the pond would eventually die. That is probably not a choice that the open space and recreation folks will make, but it's there as a possibility were they to make that choice. All the funding which we've given them, which is already over $1 million banked, then this $550,000 would come back to the CPC to be used for future recreation programs. The other 2 options are, one, to take down the dam that is at the present moment contributing to the death of the pond, because the flow of the water is limited because of the existence of that dam. I should tell you that although that will be an expensive undertaking, the state is right now asking, and will soon, people believe, mandate that many of these dams come down because they're occluding these ponds around the state and causing problems. It's also preventing some of the small fish from being able to swim up, lay their eggs, and then swim back down to the ocean, which then produce fish, which little fish, which become feed for the larger fish off our coasts. So there are many ecological reasons to consider the removal of the dam. If that does happen, it will mean that the pond's configurations would change, and there would be a great deal more of what we see here in front of us, a lot of lily pods, but there would be a rather deep section on the far end. And I don't know if you can see my pointer here. Can everybody see that or not? Yes, Robert, will you tell me if you can see it? Shake your head or nod. You can. Okay. In this end, it would be much deeper, and that area would be sustained for recreational use for ice skating and all the wonderful uses of the pond. The third option is a kind of hybrid version in which there's some dredging. The dam would remain in place where there's some dredging, but then over time that dredging would have to be repeated. So while they are deciding what to do, we're going to ask them to bank this money. And if they decide they're going to do some dredging and try to keep the pond going, then they'll use this money. If they decide to take down the dam, they'll definitely use this money. If they receive state grants, then that replace our money, then they will return it to us. So this should not be a controversial item, but I suspect questions will emerge because no consensus has presently been developed. There will be another public hearing at some point this spring on the Warner Pond restoration project. The cemetery stone wall restoration, to spend time in the cemetery and to see the needs for the wall restoration is to be persuaded this $340,000 is but a drop in the bucket in terms of the needs in the cemetery. But we are excited to be able to start this restoration project here. The Civil War Soldiers Monument Conservation and Preservation Project had received more letters of interest from our citizens than any project I have been aware of in the last 5 years that I have served on the CPC. Most notable were the letters from elementary school students who studied the absence of Private George W. Dugan's name on this particular monument. He was a Black soldier who you can't put a name on a monument until there is a certificate of death. And it took time for that to be discovered. And we received the most cunning and charming and ardent letters asking us to assure that his name could be added to this monument. The Concord Historic Preservation Plan, to hire a team of historic preservation consultants, a very specific group of people, to create a Concord Historic Preservation Plan. And this is presented to us by the Historic Preservation Committee in town. And we believe this to be an exciting and appropriate project, particularly as we head toward the 250th. The preservation, conservation of historic town plans. This is a wonderful undertaking by our town, one of our town archivists, to provide the conservation and treatment and digitization of plans of the Concord Waterworks and 7 other sheets comprising the town's plans of Concord, to go into the town hall and see these wonderful documents, which are large, very, very large, and to see how much they're crumbling and how fragile they are, and to realize that we're going to preserve them is we perceive to be a remarkably advantageous and important undertaking. And last but not least, to support and make a contribution to the town staffing, Ann Clifford being our wonderful administrative assistant, funding for staff support and the legal and technical and consulting services that we receive at the CPC, plus supplies associated with the signs that we put around, including legal ads, copying, etc. So I move that we take affirmative action on Article 26. I would add that we had $1 million, once again, $839 at $1,839,680, and we spent almost every penny of it this year. So we're not leaving with many still. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if we have questions on any of those articles.
Diane, I have one question in the chat.
Okay, Carlin.
I'm hoping we'll get some more put in. Question is this: on Warner's Pond, why do we need to act now? Why not wait a year or two to act and to save the $550,000?
Well, the $550,000 will not be spent. I mean, it will sit there. And there was no urgent application for it this year. It's a wonderful question, actually. But it's better to bank that money ahead of time now in case the middle school building project has needs for their fields, because then that money would be we would not have that money. We would not have the money available for the dam project or for the other pond project when it was needed. We anticipate that in the next 2 years, we may have fewer resources than we've had this year. So we're trying to be as prudent as we can. I'd love to hear a follow-up to that question if people have it.
There is another question regarding the request from the Regional Housing Service Office. Have the requests for the RHSO and the town administration increased over prior year levels?
Not really. They've been pretty steady. They've been incremental increases year by year.
Okay, that's all I have for the chat right now.
Okay. There are various strategies on item E on the Warner's Pond, and we understand that, and we've discussed it at great length. But we hope that this will be a satisfactory response and that the town will support this approach. Okay, thank you very much. Article 25. I want to explain that Article 25 is the appropriation for the 250th anniversary, and that is not going to be moved. So you can remove that from your warrant booklet, which I hold up again. So Article 25 is not going to be moved. And I sit on the executive committee of the 250th committee for that celebration, and I believe that alternative funding is being sought and has been found. That's an exciting undertaking, and the town of Concord will enjoy a remarkable 2-year-long celebration starting in 2024. I should remind people that this evening there is the beginning of this year's Patriots Day celebration at the Ellen Garrison birthday party celebration. And it's an exciting event. It's from 6 until 8 o'clock this evening. You begin at the Catholic Church, and then for a celebration of Ellen Garrison. And this is the very place where Frederick Douglass spoke years ago. So that's exciting. And then we'll migrate over to the town hall. Oh, right. You're right, Stefan. Today is Thursday. I'm so used to this being a Friday. It's Friday evening, not today, from 6 to 8. And we hope many people will come out and celebrate Ellen Garrison's birthday with us and begin this wonderful weekend ahead, in which we hope we will not have a great deal of rain. Okay. Let's turn now to Nathan Bosdet. Nathan is the chair of the planning board, and Nathan has some news for us. And I also want to welcome Ian Calhoun, who is here. And Ian, we'd love to spotlight you if we could. Ian is the owner of and progenitor of the remarkable 80 Thorough restaurant, and he's going to be speaking about the mobile food establishment. So I guess you're going to start actually with Article 33, though, aren't you, Nathan?
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me here to share these 3 articles. Well, there's going to be 2 articles. We'll come to that in a minute. That the planning board is bringing to town meeting. I'm glad to see that Ian is here. Actually, during the mobile food establishment bylaw discussion, I was going to mention his comment from the public hearing, so I appreciate his participation here as well. Let me just kind of quickly go over the 3 warrant articles that are that were initially going to be moved by the planning board. So the first one we have, and I'll be presenting the first 2. The first one is related to fast food. And don't get too excited about that yet. It's not that kind of fast food. And then the other, as I mentioned, is the mobile food establishments. And then the third, which I think we were expecting quite a bit of discussion around, related to mixed business, residential, and affordable housing. And when it comes time for that one, I'll explain why we've decided not to move forward with that one at this time. So I will start off with Article 33, and I will just share my screen here. Sorry if I'm sometimes looking over this way, it's because I have 2 screens and the camera is actually on this other side.
That makes a lot of sense.
All right. Everybody can see that okay?
Perfect.
Great. All right. So our first proposal, which is Article 33 and relates to a zoning bylaw amendment to section 4.5.4, which defines restaurant business uses, sections 4.7.1, which defines prohibited uses within Concord, and in addition to table 4, which defines minimum parking requirements for various principal use scenarios. So let's just get the elephant in the room here. This proposal is intended to facilitate the growth of our type of fast food, not the kind that you might be thinking of. As we walk through the proposal, please keep that in mind, and we'll come back to these Concord favorites a little bit later. In
Nathan,
simplest terms,
the Concord favorites aren't showing. You have to move your
it seems to be on my side. That's interesting. I'm not sure why it's not. Do you see it now?
no, I can see it in miniature over on the side of your presentation, but we can't, the presentation is not moving right now.
Nathan, you might want to
What?
try going to slideshow.
I did have it in slideshow.
Oh,
I'm not
okay.
sure why it's not.
There we go.
So
Those are
that's,
our favorites. Concord favorites, okay.
well, hold on a second. If I move now, is it moving for you?
It's
Or is it
No.
still-
number 2 is up now.
Ah, that's weird. I've done this a million times and it's not.
Do you want me to bring it up, Nathan?
Sure, why not? I'll stop sharing. I should mention Elizabeth Hughes, our town planner, is also joining us.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and welcome.
And
And while this is happening, I want to thank Nancy Comfrey, who's in New York City, helping with all of this, Linda Ziffrin and Carlin Reed, who's managing the chat box. Their exquisite technical work is just amazing. And Linda's actually doing all sorts of things in the background. So thank you all for quickly making Elizabeth a co-host and managing all this with such a plume.
how's that?
I can see it like I was hoping it was showing for everybody else. So if we can
Okay.
skip forward,
Thank you, Elizabeth and
Yep.
Nathan.
we can just go straight to the third slide.
Yes.
All right, in simplest terms, here's what's
Thank you.
proposed. So we'll remove the prohibition
That
to
was
fast
your
food
eye
restaurants.
doctor?
That's,
Was it? Dr. Fonda, eye surgery.
Oh. I think somebody doesn't have,
Somebody's
somebody's not
mute.
muted.
We're hearing about them going to the eye doctor. So if ever going to the eye doctor, if they could please mute, we'd be grateful. Thank you.
All right, so we'll remove the prohibition to fast food restaurants that's currently found in 4.7.1 and add fast food as a defined restaurant type under section 4.5.4 and revise the parking requirement for smaller fast food restaurants found in table 4. We would also be adding the term drive-through as a prohibited use in section 4.7.1. Next slide, please. I won't spend time reading through here, but essentially we're removing the fast food prohibition and fast food definition while inserting drive-through as a prohibition to better encapsulate what was originally intended with the definition of drive-in. This also helps to mitigate the growth of more traditional franchise-style fast food establishments, as having a drive-through is typically a key component for those. Next slide, please. And then we'll be adding a revised definition of fast food into section 4.5.4, which you can see here as a third definition of a restaurant. I'll leave that there for a second. So people, if you can go back just to allow people to read that for a second. Okay, next slide, please. This proposal would also add language to define parking requirements for fast food restaurants that may have no seats at all. So at the bolded blue language there is what would be added to the table for table 4 regarding parking. So it's either number of seats or gross floor area of the restaurant. Next slide, please. So the existing prohibition was adopted in 1981, and as it was explained then, it was in part to avoid generating significantly more traffic than other types of commercial uses, creating congestion and safety hazards. The issue of being connected to franchisors who promote standardized, highly recognizable building and sign designs, and that they might generate more noise, smells, lights, and litter, and that it would often attract loiterers. Next slide, please. Basically, making you think of the type of fast food that you may have been thinking of originally, but maybe not exactly this brand. And bonus points to anybody who recognizes this one. Next slide, please. But since 1981, we've learned that some of those assumptions were wrong and have since implemented various bylaws to mitigate the growth of what's more commonly thought of when it comes to fast food establishments. So as examples, we've since implemented the Formula Business Bylaw for Concord Center and West Concord business and village districts. And there are a number of American Planning Association studies have found that a fast food restaurant does not generate more or less traffic than a sit-down restaurant. The caveat there is that drive-in or drive-through type fast food would, but we are strictly prohibiting those and actually adding the drive-through language to strengthen that prohibition on that type of fast food. In addition, there's the adoption of the town's polystyrene prohibition in 2016. So that helps to mitigate the volume and types of litter that might be otherwise associated with fast food. And the introduction of the lighting bylaw as part of site plan review requires dark sky fixtures, a prohibition of light spillover. And then there's also no evidence that the existing fast food restaurants in Concord attract loiterers or create more noise or smells than any other equivalently sized restaurants. Next slide, please. Part of the barrier to entry for a restaurant in Concord isn't just the 12 seats to avoid the fast food prohibition. It's that once they do have at least 12 seats, and it then triggers several other requirements, such as unisex handicap bathrooms, sewer improvement fee, which typically for 12 to 28 seats would be $40,000. The minimum parking requirements, which we've discussed being adjusted in table 4, and additional requirements under state food and plumbing codes. Any one of these could be an insurmountable hurdle for someone attempting to open a small eatery in Concord. Next slide, please. So why change the bylaw? We want to help smaller restaurants to be able to succeed, and taking roadblocks out of their way is a step in the right direction. Amending these aspects of the bylaw will allow for small restaurants similar to those Concord favorites, which we enjoy today. It would allow for them to open without the additional financial burden that comes from opening a restaurant with more than 12 seats or less than 50% of their business coming from dine-in patrons. Excuse me. Next slide, please. There we go. The reality in Concord is and can be different, which brings us back to these Concord favorites. This proposal is not about the typical Formula Business type fast food chain that you may have been thinking about at the beginning. There are already bylaws in place to limit their access, and they have the financial resources to overcome the limitations I mentioned earlier. This proposal is about adding to the vitality of our town by making it easier for the next generation of Concord favorites to open. So with that, I will open this one up for any questions or comments.
Okay, Nathan, I have one in the chat, unless there's something else that Diane wants to attach first. Diane, you're unmute.
I just want to remind people, if you do have questions and you don't put them in the chat box, please just raise your hand and we'll call on you. Okay, Carlin, go ahead.
Okay, this is about Article 33 fast food. Will this apply town-wide or only in certain areas of town? Will it impact any new businesses that may be located on Elm Street near the Paparazzi restaurant area? If this is enacted and passed by town meeting, how soon will it go into effect?
Those are great questions. So yes, this would apply town-wide. Where I should point out, as I mentioned, the Formula Business Bylaw is applicable to Concord Center and the West Concord business and village districts. The second question was, well, would this apply to the area over by where paparazzi is? So yes, it would still be applicable there. And actually, not at 2 planning board meetings ago, we had an initial proposal regarding not where paparazzi is, but the restaurant next door to that. I'm drawing a blank on the name of it at the moment.
Asian Gourmet.
Thank you very much. That is looking to be redeveloped into a Dunkin' Donuts. And then the last question was, how quickly would this be implemented after town meeting? That is a good question. Elizabeth, what is the answer to that?
Yeah, zoning bylaw amendments do not go into effect until after they are approved by the Attorney General. And that usually happens anywhere from 3 months to 6 months following town meeting.
So
Thanks.
quickly, not. Dee Ortner has her hand up. Thank you. Dee, welcome. She's unmuting herself. She's busy unmuting herself. Here she goes.
Unmute. There you
There you
go.
go.
Okay, thank you. I think that was probably Carlin. Thank you. I have a quick question for you. How does this new change alter or not alter the handicap parking requirements?
It does not change any of the handicap parking requirements.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I have a question, Nathan. What
Sure.
was the impetus for this? Did you have people approach the planning board and ask that they wanted to open a restaurant but couldn't because of these prohibitions?
I will let Elizabeth speak to it, but I know that she has directly interacted with people who were looking to open restaurants and sort of ran into these hurdles. And so that was really the drive to take a look at this and see if there was a way to, make this work, but still kind of, keeping in mind what Concord is and what Concord wants to be. So,
Thank
but
you. That's-
Elizabeth, did you want to?
Yeah, so it's kind of been evolving over, the past, I'm going to say the past 10, 15 years, starting with everybody remembers the Country Kitchen. So that was a legally non-conforming use. And when they decided they didn't want to run it anymore, there was no opportunity for somebody to take that over because there was no seating. It was just a nice sandwich shop. And so it's not a permitted use, and the changes that would have had to been done to sell the business and upgrade the kitchen and stuff, it wouldn't have, it wasn't allowed, and they wouldn't have been able to financially do that. Then a year ago, I think it was about a year ago, there was somebody who wanted to do a little Asian bubble tea restaurant. In the building, there used to be a little dry cleaners in the front building at Crosby's Marketplace on the back side of the building. And they just wanted to have a little bubble tea restaurant, and people could come in and only have just a handful of seats. And by the time it was 12 seats and over $40,000 in a sewer improvement fee and the handicap bathroom and all. And so they walked away from that project as well. So it's been happening where, people have come in and they just want to do just a little small place. And then I think we also saw with COVID, like New London Pizza, they had the little takeout window across the street. I spoke to the owner for Bedford Farms, the ice cream stand, and he had to have at least 12 seats in there. And with COVID, he was able to take some of those seats out and have a much better operation inside for people and the employees. So that's kind of how this has evolved over the years.
Thank you. That's so helpful for everyone. I'm so appreciative. Okay, do we see other questions? Carlin, do you have any more in the chat box?
No, nothing else in the chat box.
Okay. I wonder, in this next one, could we also, after Nathan presents number 34, let's spotlight Ian Calhoun and Nathan Bosdet simultaneously, because Nathan can also speak to a small eating establishment that he has run, Mooncusser, I believe it's called. Ian, help me if I'm wrong. Mooncusser in the summer. Okay, here we go.
Let's
Okay.
remind people if they are going to be spotlighted, they need to have their video on.
Oh, Ian, you need to have your video on.
All right, I'm ready.
He's ready. Okay.
Ian, would you like to go after, or would you like to go first?
Yeah, why don't you go first, and then I can say a few words, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions that come up too.
Great, thank you. All right, so for Article 34, I apologize. Linda Miller has been the one that's been presenting this, so if I stumble through these slides a little bit more than I did for the one that I apologize. All right. This is Article 34, a zoning bylaw amendment to allow mobile food establishments, often referred to as food trucks, within the town. This article will allow food trucks to be licensed by the town's health division and police department. License fees will offset these costs. Food trucks will be temporary and limited in the number and location, except if special permits are granted by the town manager or select board or their designee, such as for town events. Let's define a mobile food establishment. It is a food service operation as permitted under the Massachusetts Retail Food Code, which is operated from a movable, motor-driven or propelled vehicle, portable structure, or watercraft that is able to change location. And what is not a mobile food establishment? Caterers that bring food to your business or residence, food or meal delivery.
Nathan, we're not seeing a slide on that. If we need one, I don't see it.
Oh, no, this is just part, there is not, this is just part of that. I'm just defining what is
Thank you.
not.
All
Yep,
right.
thank you. So caterers are not a mobile food establishment, or food or meal delivery services like Instacart or DoorDash. Next slide, please. Now let's go through the proposed bylaw section by section. Part 1 adds a section to our zoning bylaw that would define mobile food establishment as we've just discussed. And that's shown there on the screen. Next slide, please. The introduction and Part 2A established that food trucks will be treated uniformly throughout Concord, are temporary rather than permanent, and are restricted to private property except when approved by the town manager on municipal property or the select board or their designee on public roadways. I will point out that there has been, since our, we just had a planning board meeting on Tuesday. And so there's some draft language or change to the language under 5.4.6 that would really refine the intent for the private property to basically add in language that would say for a private event for the property owner or tenant and their invitees. This is a direct result of during the public hearing, we got some feedback about just making it clear that it was for specific events on a private property and not that someone would establish, running a food truck parked at their residence. Okay, next slide, please. We skipped. Were you already on 2B? Yep, okay. Part 2B recognizes that the health division and police department are responsible for regulating and enforcing food truck practices. All other permits or licenses needed by the trucks will still apply. For example, the signage bylaw and lighting requirements would apply for food trucks. Next slide, please. The next two sections, C and D, refer to limitations on food trucks. First, food trucks can operate at the same location for a maximum of 52 days per calendar year. Hypothetically, this could be every Monday throughout the year to provide lunch to a school or medical building, or daily Monday through Friday for 10 weeks during fall foliage or a CSA season at a farm stand. It's a limited duration intended to be economically attractive to food entrepreneurs who will invest in trucks, pay the license fees to the town, and comply with our regulations, hopefully to operate profitably within Concord. Next slide, please. This next section limits the number of food trucks on a private property at any one time to 2. Relief from this requirement can be granted by the Board of Appeals by special permit if they find it is without substantial detriment to the neighborhood or risk to public safety. A special permit application to the board requires notification of abutters and a public hearing. So again, we're putting in place things to keep it sort of narrow in scope, how often and frequent you would see the use of food trucks. Next slide, please. Currently, Concord's established restaurants cannot receive a license from the Town Health Division if they would like to operate a food truck based from their location here to serve either destinations in or outside of Concord. This portion of the amendment provides them with the ability to park their food trucks on their restaurant's property. And this is part of what Ian will speak to a little bit later, I think. Next slide, please. There we go. Finally, you may have noticed that your children or grandchildren in Concord do not have the opportunity to participate in one of the cherished summer traditions, the ice cream truck. When you and your kids hear the ice cream truck jingle coming down the road, Article 34 will allow you to enjoy those creamsicles and ice cream bars in the summer. So I always joke that I know my kids are very much looking forward to that should this pass. Next slide, please. Oh, I think you went one too far, one back. There we go. This third section of the article amends the restaurant definition in the bylaw to include the accessory use of mobile food establishments. This amendment is needed to allow a restaurant to get the required license from the health division to operate a food truck out of the restaurant, such as reasons to be cheerful. Next slide. To recap, Article 34 will allow food trucks in Concord for a maximum of 52 days per year. Any food trucks on municipal property or town roads must be authorized by the town manager or select board, respectively. Will be limited to 2 on any one property unless approved by the Board of Appeals. Will be licensed by the public health and will be licensed by public health and police and allow all other necessary permits. Allow restaurants accessory use of a food truck, which may be parked on the restaurant's property. And lastly, allow ice cream trucks on public roads. Next slide, please. So why change the bylaw? Provide more variety and choice of food options to Concord citizens and our visitors. To support our restaurants who could profit from additional food service options and house their food trucks within Concord. Support entrepreneurial food service businesses that might want to locate within Concord. And create a permitting process to protect the public health and safety of food trucks that are used within Concord. In conclusion, we believe that Article 34, a zoning bylaw amendment for mobile food establishments, represents progress for Concord. Thank you, and I guess we'll let, before we do questions, I think maybe if we let Ian make a statement there.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, great. Well, thank you for having me. It's great
Ian, let me introduce you for just a minute for people who came in a little bit later. Ian is the owner and progenitor of the fantastic 80 Thorough restaurant here in Concord. And he also has in the summer, is it Mooncusser?
Yes, Mooncusser is a full service restaurant and then a fast casual offshoot called Custer's.
Oh, called Custer's, okay, which has fabulous food as well. So I think Ian is representing the restaurateurs in town and has I was pleased to hear his commentary at the town meeting, at the public hearing.
Thank you. And also for those of you who don't know me, I live obviously in Concord as well. So it's great to be part of this process. 80 Thorough has been around with my ownership for 12 years. And it's been, wonderful to be a part of the community during the pandemic, among other different things that we did to kind of keep ourselves going. I did pop up a version of my fast casual Custer's operation, which serves casual New England seafood, like think of fish and chips, lobster rolls, clam chowder, that kind of thing. And we ran it out of the 80th row kitchen on select Thursday, Friday, and Saturday lunch periods. And it was really popular and successful. But as we've kind of returned to normal operations, we don't have the room in our kind of kitchen to both prepare for dinner, and to this more casual food, which, isn't being served anywhere in Concord really at the moment. And I was excited to read about this potential bylaw. I didn't put any effort into bringing it about, and actually discovered it in the Concord Bridge. So thanks to those of you who contribute to that paper. But I just want to talk about how I could foresee using this and how it could help an existing, restaurant. So I think the first part is that, I could operate a food truck on the property of 80th Row with obviously permission from the landlord and some others. So I would be able to kind of bring back that fast casual concept, which represents a cuisine type that's not, otherwise in the town. So that would be wonderful. Then the other benefit is that I could use 80th Row as the quote base of operations for the food truck. So to operate a food truck anywhere in Massachusetts, you need to be either associated with a restaurant or a commercial kitchen space. And that's a big hurdle for some people because they have to buy the truck and then they also have to have a space to do a lot of the kind of prep and stuff like that. So with my Concord-based truck, I'd be able to operate on the property. I'd also be able to bring it to other towns. I think also, Nathan, there wasn't a slide in this presentation, but in the last one, there was something showing how common food truck licensing is around us. It seems like almost every town around us allows food trucks.
Yeah, that's correct. It basically is every town around us with the exception, I think, of Carlisle.
Yeah, okay. I don't think, yeah. So, but anyway, just to kind of bring it back. So I could operate on the property there. I could use this as a base of operation for other places in Massachusetts. And then just thinking about where it might fit in, to Concord, as we kind of got past the silliness of the people operating them at home. I'm thinking about a place like Baker Ave that has, a huge concentration of, workers, and there's actually no food service even in that part of Concord. There are lots of kind of nearby uses. But so the way that would work, I think, is that the private property owner in that case would be a business, and they would say, we want to have a food truck here, for a day to serve lunch to the staff or that kind of thing. So that's kind of how I could see it being used by existing Concord restaurant, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have to the best of my ability.
Thank you, Ian, so much. Carlin, first of all, raise your hand. Please raise your hand. Use this device if you have a question.
I just want to add one thing before we
Sure,
move on to Q&A on that to build off of something Ian said, and I'm glad you brought it up, the fact that the surrounding communities, kind of two factors to that, if you think about it, is that the reality of other communities around us allowing that is sort of twofold. They then have restaurateurs that are able to sort of develop this and obviously profit from it in other communities surrounding Concord and Carlisle, but also those towns benefit from revenues for those restaurateurs that are based within those towns. So Concord is kind of missing out on both of those aspects of being able to sort of incubate or home grow some restaurateurs or restaurant ideas, such as what Ian is mentioning, but we're also missing out on potential revenues from those, because it's not just about being able to participate within Concord. I'm not sure if Ian is thinking about this, but it's possible for them to then also go outside of Concord to a neighboring town if there's an event or something like that there, and those revenues would be pulled back into Concord in terms of the taxes associated with the sales of those foods. So again, it's a benefit to the town even if they are serving outside of the town. And I will also say I really like Custer's.
All right, thank you.
Full disclosure, it was delicious.
And Nathan, this is a really important point when we come to the 250 celebration as well.
Yes, absolutely.
people that come, our restaurants are fantastic and robust, but they won't be able to handle the people, all the people that will be coming, to Concord. And so this will be a fantastic source of revenue for our town. I don't see any hands raised. So Carlin, do you have questions in the chat box?
Sure, I have three. Two of them deal with a really good question, focusing on the time frame of 52 days per year. Why do we need a limit of 52 days for food trucks? Why shouldn't we allow them year-long and let the free market decide? That's the first question. And the second related question about that, would restaurant food trucks also be limited to 52 days per year?
I'll actually go backward on that one. So the answer to the last question is yes. So the food truck, whether the food trucks period would be 52 days out of the year, regardless of their association. If I understood the question correctly.
So for, if Ian wanted to have, a food truck, as part of 80th row, and parked it on that property, then no, the 52 days a year to allow that truck to be parked on that property, would not be in force. And that's specifically in, the proposed, bylaw.
To operate or park there?
Well, let me.
I know we allow it to park there to be serviced, cleaned, and all of that. That's definitely not limited to 52 days out of the year.
Yeah, my reading of it was that it would be unlimited if you were Concord based, but we have to look at the language of it.
Yeah, I'll take a look.
As for the why 52 days out of the year, I think sort of two responses to that. One would be, I think we were just thinking of, when you're sort of building this out, and trying to anticipate the response from the community, and I think there was some concern that if we just said unlimited all the time everywhere, there wouldn't be necessarily support for that. And so if 52 days seems to be not enough, of course we can always come back and amend the bylaw to be more or fewer days, depending on what the feedback from the community is after it's been in place.
Thank you for that clarification.
And
Carlin,
Diane, to the
Yes, Lou.
previous question, no, the section in the draft bylaw, a mobile food establishment that is an accessory use to a restaurant and has a valid base of operation license from the Health Division shall be exempt from section 5.4.6C, which is the 52-day limitation, and permitted to park on the property on which the restaurant is located.
Thank you. That clarification is helpful.
Thank you, Elizabeth. See, this is why if Linda was doing this.
That's right.
I see a hand up here, Pamela Dritt.
Hi, thank you. Does that mean then that Mr. Calhoun's food truck could vend on his property for excess people all year round? Or does it mean that he could move it to like Baker Avenue and be exempt from the restriction of 52 days a year? I think that we should change the rules after we've had a problem, not before. I urge you to remove that 52-day restriction. I would imagine that a delicious food truck that the neighborhood really likes, why would they be limited? Oh, we can't have this. It's not Thursday. It's only on Thursdays that this truck is allowed.
So the 50, so sorry to use you as the example, Ian, but no, he could not take, it is only the 52 days for the truck to be parked on that property where the restaurant is located. So he wouldn't be able to take the truck to Baker Ave every other day of the week. It's only for the property where the restaurant is located. The 52-day a year limitation, the board can, and on the floor of town meeting, can make it more restrictive. You would not be able to do an amendment on the floor of town meeting to make it less restrictive. So should this pass and there's consensus in the community that the 52-day a year limitation is not needed, then the following year there could be an amendment to remove that limitation.
It
Thank
just seems
you.
it's
That's
like
good.
building a swimming pool and everybody's looking forward to it, but it's only shallow water.
So the planning board has had numerous discussions regarding mobile food trucks for the past 10 years. There's been significant issues and concerns raised by the brick and mortar restaurants. And so the board felt that this was a good starting point, which is how many zoning bylaw amendments get done. They get passed, and then a year or two later, amendments, fears and anxieties that people think they're going to have regarding a bylaw amendment don't appear. And then that's why a year or two later, you may see an amendment.
Thank you so much.
Right, because people fear like the opening of shadow restaurants. But I will say, from talking to many food truck operators, the reality is that the day in, day out parking of a food truck is not the profitable part. The profitable part is being able to go to events, either as a caterer or to peak crowd events such as a concert or a town celebration or that kind of thing. So I think it is unlikely, even if there were no restrictions, I think it's unlikely that someone would just come and kind of, park out in Concord for the whole year. But it does sound like a nice way to mitigate some people's concerns, that a food truck will appear and serve their food right next to them.
Thank you. This is also very helpful. Carlin, do you have other questions?
Yes, one more for this. It's about licensing fees, and we had a situation just posed a bit ago. How will licensing fees be collected from owners or operators of fast food trucks? We had two scenarios discussed just now about a truck operating here in Concord, but also a truck operating based in Concord, but operating outside of town. How do you do the licensing, and will two towns be licensing the same truck? How does that work?
So how the licensing works is there's two types of licenses. If somebody wants to come to Concord with a food truck, they are required to get a license to operate that food truck for that day, or whether the health division issues a seasonal license. That is one type of license that is collected as part of that application process. Then there's the base of operation license, which that is issued by the town where that truck parks and where the truck gets cleaned and serviced. That is a separate license that is issued by the town where the truck, I'm going to say where the truck lives. Where at the end of the day, it goes and it gets cleaned and filled and water and all of that. So those are the two different types of licenses issued by the health division.
Got it. Thanks. That's it, Diane.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Nathan, thank you. Ian, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Nathan, just let's remind people that article number 35 is not going to be moved. And you want to give us a brief reason so that in case people have questions?
Sure.
Please.
Yeah. So, so Article 35, the planning board is not planning to move that forward. So the reasoning that came from that is there's within the language of the bylaw as it was written, there came up some issues around if a development or a project is going to be rentals, the in lieu payment language for affordable housing, it was difficult or really not addressed in that in the bylaw in terms of how to account for what a market rate unit would be if the units are all rentals. So that was one issue. Another was there were some mathematical issues in terms of different project sizes and a developer being compliant with the explicit language of the bylaw. And then sort of the bigger context is the MBTA zoning requirements, community zoning requirements that the town is going to have to address in the very near future. And that will more than likely would have affected what we were putting in place. And so it seemed, given all of those things, to rather than try and put this through only to have to change it in the near term, to take a step back and then address it again once we have a better sense of what's required under the MBTA community zoning requirements and formulate it to fit that. And so, yeah, so at this point in time, we're not moving that Article 35 forward.
Thank you so much, Nathan. I know that the urgency in town for both more housing and affordable housing and diverse housing caused a lot of people to be excited about Article number 35.
We were excited as well, yes, yeah, but
I know there'll be ongoing probably questions and discussions. Thank you, Nathan, and for the work you do chairing that board. It takes a lot of work, as does your whole committee.
Thank you again. I appreciate the invitation to come to speak with all of you.
Thank you. And I also want to thank Elizabeth Hughes for helping us work our way through this through this forest of 0.5, 0.3, C.
Anytime.
The kind of thing that keeps one awake at night.
Oh, it does.
We're now going to turn to Alan Cathcart, who is here to speak with us about the enterprise funds 38, 39, 40, and 41. Good morning, Alan.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can. And I just want to say thank you to Alan, who is taking time from his...
No, we're good. Thank you very much. We're good. Thank you, Diane.
Yeah, that time from his day off to work with us. So thank you, Alan.
I've removed one large rhododendron ball already, so life is good.
He's out working in his yard.
And anyway, I just also want to include just in the discussion, just to introduce Justine St. John, who is with us as we talk the solid waste recycling program. Justine, if you can just wave so they know who you are. And then Bob Hill is also our kind of senior management analyst at Public Works. He's involved with all of our finance and business management end of things. So Bob, if you wave your hand.
Would you like them on the spotlight as well?
I think right now what we want to do is just let you know that they're there. We talked, Diane, the other day as far as the format, and I think rather than talk at everybody, people who know me know I kind of get enthusiastic about our programs. What I'd like to do is put it out there as far as, so we are targeting Article 38. We'll start with that one. That's the solid waste disposal fund expenditures. And, hopefully you've had an opportunity to sort of look at some of the hearings, the FinCom and that sort of thing. So rather than repeat that, what I'm interested in is if there's some kind of questions that the group might have, let's pose them, and then we can package a presentation to respond and incorporate the answers. Is that something, if anybody has anything that's kind of burning or on the solid waste recycling that they'd like to ask, we'll try to keep track of them and respond, based on our, sort of then a very brief presentation of, sort of, would that be helpful, Diane?
I think it might be wiser, since there are people watching this who perhaps have not had a chance to review the warrant carefully, if you could summarize an article first,
Okay.
or just verbally, and then we can, I don't know if you've been made a co-host, but
Do you have slides to share?
I can share. So what I have is a couple screens open. If I go to share screen and I go here,
That's
and you
perfect. Yeah.
You can see, okay, so I've got a little bit of, I can see two screens. So this is Article 38. And in essence, the solid waste program is a enterprise based program. It's an opt-in for the communities, for the community of Concord. We take in revenue through a combination of subscription fees and then tags that are sort of designed to allow the subscription covers base costs and make sure that we can sort of have a fully functional program. And the tags really are a way of incentivizing the reduction in waste. And that's really sort of a major overarching interest for the community and the state, where what we do is all about ideally waste management, waste reduction. And we can have a conversation a little bit about the evolution of how we're dealing with our household waste, where increased regulations and awareness of environmental impacts make us need to become a little bit more creative in how we collect and dispose of household solid waste. And so one of the major drivers, and again, I'll stop there and say, are there questions before I sort of launch into an overview? And if someone has any, and I can continue if you'd like, but you let me know. I'm just trying to respond to the group's interest more than anything.
Right. Of course, this will be viewed by many people, Alan, who are not
Okay.
here to ask questions. So Stefan Bader, I think, has a question and is a good one.
Okay, great.
Carlin, can you
Sure.
read?
The question is, solid waste disposal costs are rumored to increase dramatically. Are there plans to mitigate or smooth out the expected sticker shock? And Diane, there's another question after this one, but let's go with this particular question.
If I can hear the other question, then I'll proceed and I'll know what I'm focused on. So that's
Okay.
helpful. If
right.
there's another one, yeah.
The second one, isn't Article 38 on solid waste on the town meeting consent calendar?
Yes, okay. So we'll start with the answer to the second question is it has been placed on the consent calendar, correct? So it has been vetted through the hearing. It is presently on the consent calendar. We understand if there are 10 participants at town meeting who are interested in removing it, it could be. But really, I think what I'd like to do is share what I think is the need to know for the community. And I think Stefan sort of mentioned something on the costs of service and tying it to really a challenge industry-wide, which is increased costs for both the routine household waste, residential waste, as well as some of the recyclables. And what we're seeing is in Concord, we have a program that was based on a model it established over 25 years ago. And at that time, there was a different market. And during that time, we realized that recycling actually was considered, had value. If you separated cardboard and paper, it was actually a commodity. And the town's contracts with we've been working with waste management, I think the entire term since we've started the program. We used to get revenue. It was a revenue source. And by separating and having dual stream recycling, we were able to actually collect money back into our fund. And that helped offset some of the costs for the collection and disposal of the other household waste. A few years ago, that model sort of flipped. I know it was something called the China sword policy came about, where a lot of our cardboard was being sent overseas. They started scrutinizing the quality of the recyclables and integrity, and just for a combination of reasons, we are now looking at significant costs to actually not just collect, but manage the cardboard and paper. And that has really made us reevaluate our existing program. We have, for this group, important to understand the last 3 years at Public Works, there's been significant transition in personnel. We had a program that was really overseen by one individual. That individual moved on from Concord, and I was in a position assigned to be Public Works Director. Started looking at how we're doing this program, and within the last year, we've actually had the solid waste recycling program absorbed within our highway grounds division, because they actually provide a lot of the support for a lot of the events that we have. And Justine St. John, who's on this Zoom, has agreed graciously to step up and sort of take over this program, working with the highway ground superintendent and staff to marshal forward. We had a contract with Waste Management that came to terms, I think it was 1 or 2 years ago, and where we realized we didn't have the complete bandwidth to understand what's the future of Concord's needs and interests when it comes to waste management. We entered into a 2-year extension that would allow them to continue the same, the nature of the same service. We didn't think it was appropriate to change service to the community, but we are very interested, and we're going to be working with a third-party consultant very soon to reevaluate Concord's needs and interests, so that we can then go with essentially, we believe, a new model of how we may be developing our solid waste services. And Justine, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that. It might be helpful to hear from you, but I think this transition is going to be very important. It speaks to Stefan's sort of question on, are we aware of the industry trend and costs? Very much so. How is it that we're going to sort of incorporate that into a program that provides the basic services of, residential household waste collection, but also to expand on that to include other materials that are now being sort of prohibited from being disposed of in the old kind of fashion. An example of that would be, for instance, mattresses. So Justine, do you want to offer anything on that front?
Sure. So there are a few things. When we were talking about the contract for our 2-year extension, there were options that Waste Management did give to us for other additional extensions, and things for us to consider. And one of the things that we are looking into that would be a huge cost saver for the program would actually be changing from dual stream recycling to single stream recycling. That's something we have, Concord has historically had dual stream recycling, and back in the day, that was the elite recycling. That was the way to do it. Part of it was what Alan spoke to earlier, as far as there was revenue involved. There was a market for it. There was a way, and the materials recovery facilities didn't have the advancements that they have now to be able to properly sort single stream materials that came in. So it was easier to send, like we send our paper to Springfield, we send our commingled to Avon, and and none of it should mix. But we could bring it to one facility, which would reduce the amount of trucks we need to have in town. It would reduce the carbon footprint of trucks driving multiple places. And it would reduce the amount of drivers. So that is definitely something that we're looking at as we move forward. We are looking forward to engaging with a third-party consultant regarding the entire program. There are a number of consultants that come in and take a look at the way the program works, and seeing whether or not the pay-as-you-throw model, whether the cost is right, whether we're pricing ourselves out of the market, and we're really interested to kind of hear what the opportunities are for there. And in the meantime, we've also, with those hard to recycle items that Alan mentioned, we do have a mattress container down at the compost site now. So we do take appointments, and that is extremely popular at this point, as the opportunity for people to recycle their mattresses. For people who aren't aware, as of November of 22, mattresses are no longer allowed to be thrown away. So it used to be that if you couldn't, we've had the recycling program for a little over a year for mattresses, but if you didn't want to bring it there, you could just call Waste Management and have them dispose of it at curbside. And now you can't do that anymore. So we definitely knew we needed to get something in there for the residents. And then the other thing that we've had over the past several years, we've had such a good response to trying to recycle styrofoam. Everybody loves bring it to drop off, swap off day. And so what we've done is actually this season, we just started it April 1st when the compost site opened. We are going to have a styrofoam container at the compost site for the entire season. So through November, when the compost site is open, you do the same thing. You would buy a bag either online or in person at Concord Public Works. And then you can fill the bag and just bring it down whenever the compost site is open. So we're really excited about being able to add some initiatives that we know that we've heard from residents are important, while continuing to reevaluate and make it the most fiscally responsible program we can do.
That's really exciting. Of course, December is when all the styrofoam comes roaring in.
We'll still do the holiday part too.
Okay. Thank you so much. The league has often asked for the enterprise funds not to be on consent calendars, so that this kind of conversation can take place across town and in the community. And this is invaluable. Nancy Bucas, you had your hand waving.
This is a billing request. Could you please bill people once a year rather than sort of in the middle of the year when some people are away on vacation and that kind of thing? Could you do it once a year, please?
We'll definitely take consideration. We'll consider all options. I know that that's something when I first looked in the program, that was one of the first things I said too, because it's definitely a heavy lift for the staff as well. But we need to make sure that our program is well supported. And sometimes having multiple billing cycles is the way to do that. But I look forward to having a third-party consultant come in and give us advice on that.
Thank you so much. This has been terrifically helpful. Let's go on, if there aren't more questions, to the next article, which is the sewer system expenditures, item 39, Alan.
Okay, thank you, Justine. You're welcome to stick around if you want, but if you need to head off and get other things done, thank you. Bob, if you stick around, I'd appreciate it. I'm going to go to bring the article up just so you can see it like I did before, just so we set the table, go on to this screen.
For those people who are particularly ardently interested in affordable housing, the question of the sewer system expenditures and expansion, as Keith Bergman is prone to say and fond of saying.
Okay, Diane, you've muted yourself.
Yeah.
Whoops, sorry.
I'm not going to steal your punchline. What was the punchline from Keith Bergman?
Keith Bergman says that a sewer makes a village. We really the need for our sewer system and its effective and healthful expansion is something that I know is very much on Alan's mind. So, Alan.
Sure. So yes, I'd like to say I expand that water first, then sewer, but they're both essential. So I think with the sewer fund, we have. Excuse me, there's two articles. One is deals with the collection of fees and user fees and special service fees relating to the maintenance and operation of the sewer system. I think in the interest of this group, in sort of respect to the fact that people may not know everything, I'm going to zip through a couple slides because this may be helpful. Can you see this slide, the municipal sewer system?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. So is Diane sort of alluded to, the sewer system serves a little over a third of the community. 2/3 of the community is served by private on-site septic systems. The kind of challenge with the sewer system is costs of the municipal sewer are escalating, primarily driven by environmental regulations. When we treat wastewater, it's primarily to protect the environment. So just, that's, an important aspect. The first part of municipal sewer system was to protect public health and safety, get the wastewater away from the densely populated areas for public health. And that was how we functioned for 100 years or so. We then got into the Clean Water Act in the 1970s, where we identified a need and interest to protect the environment, and that was equally important. Most of our costs over the last 30 years have been driven to not just maintain the former system, but to improve the quality of wastewater, entering into the environment. So that really is a significant driver for us. We have our infrastructure is identified on this slide. We do have one wastewater treatment facility that is aging. We did a major upgrade in 2007. We are now, working on 20 years later, and a lot of the life cycle of major processes and equipment is about 20 years. So we are in the process of doing a facility plan, a study of that particular facility, trying to identify any sort of opportunities for improvements or expansions at that site. It is regulated, the discharge through the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, 2 separate permits, one state, one federal. The control of that waste stream is rigorous. We have attempted to make a case on behalf of Concord that if we could expand that facility and increase our discharge to the Concord River, we could do a lot of beneficial things for the town of Concord. It is very, very difficult in the state of Massachusetts and Region 1 EPA to get an expansion of a facility. The lack of the ability to do this has really compromised Concord's ability to realize economic growth development. And as Diane mentioned, it's become a constraint on our housing stock as well. We have worked, staff as well as the town manager's office, aggressively to try and do what we can to try and influence the regulatory process. We have spent decades doing this, and we've only recently just learned that despite a lot of good planning and a real identified need, they are still resistant to work with the town to expand our facility. That was very disappointing, and we only learned that about a year ago. We have been looking at other alternatives to try and expand the service area. To do so, we have to look at groundwater discharge sites. It's a little less, it can be a little bit more challenging. We've identified, and I'm going to actually go to a few slides here to talk about some of the drivers of why we need more capacity. Can you see this slide? As far as
I just want to point out that you're really presenting 39 and 40 concurrently, so this is very helpful. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. So, correct, and that does say here 39 is the sewer system expenditures. 40, just to be clear, is a dedicated fund for new users or expansion, or people who come onto the system. They put into this fund, which is then pooled to allow the town and actually the ratepayers, again, because only 1/3 of the town are responsible for these funds. If you're on a Title V system, you don't contribute to this. That's 2/3 of the community. But for new users, we collect a sewer improvement fee, and that goes into this dedicated fund that can and will be used for expansion of plant and treatment when we find what that expansion should be. So that's very important, and that's there to try and protect and buffer the existing ratepayer from having to absorb costs of any exceedance or something from the permit. But back in 2003, we completed a CWMP. That's a comprehensive wastewater master plan. It was a significant effort. It resulted in something that was lauded at the time through the state as a sort of one of the better studies that were done to demonstrate needs, to demonstrate how we were going to manage any existing capacity that was available. It was very limited. We identified some neighborhoods that we would, if we were to expand, where we would expand. The neighborhoods were driven primarily because of environmental issues. If there's a neighborhood that would likely require lot of Title V variances, the variances are not desirable. We were looking to possibly extend or expand the sewer system into those areas. We basically allocated a certain volume of our remaining capacity to those neighborhoods. It went through a town meeting review and approval. We've stayed committed to preserving the right to expand into those areas if and when the economy and needs were sort of compelling. Regrettably, we've only had and realized the expansion of one, the first phase. There really hasn't been an opportunity, funds, or real driver to go to the next step on these phase 2, 3, 4. But we preserved capacity for them. We've also allowed a modest amount of infill. Infill is if you have frontage to the sewer and you are looking to change your use, it is vetted with the fact that the more capacity that's taken up there, the less likely we'll be able to serve the future phases that we've already committed to. So there's a balancing act as far as we have a constraint as far as how much we can treat. We have to manage it very judiciously. There's a plan in place that is our compass. That's the CWMP. But we've also, over the years, gone through, and you'll see some of the planning efforts that have come after the CWMP, and they all relate to the town having to, have an interest in expanding or, I guess accommodating additional growth. And so our plan is, still has its constraints, but we've also recognized that there are some driving needs that the community's identified that we're trying to, address. When we talk about what we've done to look at, I guess, the relief valve, people may remember that there was a brownfield grant back in 2008. We evaluated the W.R. Grace property for a large groundwater discharge site. It was a concept, but it was kind of the first phase of if we had to expand in a significant way, where it could be a potential site for that. We did desktop analysis at the treatment plant in 2009. That's what we've used to tell the state and federal government that we believe we could put more highly treated water through the existing treatment facility. We think it would be responsible. We push that, but we think we have capacity to continue the environmental protection, but also expand to the tune of a couple 100,000 gallons a day through the existing facility, and at a fairly reasonable cost to the town of Concord. Just have not been successful. We then looked in 2013 of a groundwater discharge site at the wastewater treatment plant. In essence, rather than treat it and go to the river, we do a side stream, treat it and go to the old sand beds that are located there. That is our relief valve today. It's a very expensive alternative. And until we really need to go that route, we put it on hold. But that was, we got approval for, I think it was 155,000 gallon of discharge But in order to realize that, we'd have to do some major improvements to the treatment facility, including denitrification and new processes to realize that. But we have that in our back pocket. It's just the cost per gallon to do that is significant. And so we sort of, reserve that to a kind of last, sort of last ditch opportunity. But we're also exploring and interested in some other alternatives with groundwater discharge areas, potentially in the White Pond neighborhood. That's an area of great interest. I will share that we are bringing on board a consultant to revisit our 2003 plan, the CWMP, to see what, if any, conditions have changed in the community, to evaluate should we reprioritize what we had already identified as an allocation strategy based on existing drivers today. Maybe some of those neighborhoods that had been flagged as in need may need to be taken off the list, and maybe we need to readjust it and reassign it towards infill for affordable housing, for economic growth development, that sort of thing. So those are what we're going to be exploring. And really our plan was a 20-year plan. So again, it was completed in 2003. It's now 2023. And I think it's probably a good time where we kind of revisit this. I know there's a lot of community interest in trying to understand, well, why do we have this constraint? There's a lot of documentation, but I think what we need to do is figure out, what, if anything, do we need to do for reallocation? And, we are trying to get creative, but we're bringing a consultant on board to look at some other angles of our permits, and maybe even, partnering with some other facilities that may have treatment capacity. Everything will be on the table, and this will be a very public process. So Diane, the point of town meeting, this isn't going to be the time. We may have a conversation about this, but if we move forward, any change to that plan will require a lot of outreach and communication with the community. So I think those are the overarching issues.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alan. I know that when you mentioned the White Pond, one of the questions that citizens would probably wonder about, and it's a question born as much of ignorance as anything else, is that there are already bacterial problems in that kettle pond out there, and would we be adding to the nitrogen and the eutrophication of that pond if there were more sewer systems, or would a sewer system actually offset so much of the septic systems which are maybe pouring into the White Pond area? And that's really, as I said, a question born of ignorance, but if you could address that, it would be helpful.
Yeah, so White Pond has a lot of contributing factors as far as nutrients getting into the pond. It includes swimmers, bathers, and that sort of thing. But it also includes lawn care, maintenance, and land use activities, as well as the septic systems that are there. So all these are contributing factors. When we did a detailed assessment of needs in 2000 to 2003, it was clear that a alternative to the Title V systems with a shared package treatment plant, that's what you'd call it, is so far away from our centralized system that would require sort of a separate collection system and treatment facility. It was identified as the appropriate long-term solution. The challenge was the cost and the impact, to the neighborhood was pretty significant. And back then, there wasn't a real interest in seeing us pursue that much further. In fact, there was a rejection of that back then.
In fact,
More recently, there's more interest. And I think I'm not sure if it's because people don't realize the cost, but I do think with the town having, control of the beach, there's now an interest. Well, can the town share in that burden? That's on the table. So it's not an easy solution, but it still would require identifying a site where you could have some sort of treatment system. You don't know the extent of that, and a discharge area. And those were the two, challenges we had in 2000, 2003. So the need is there. That hasn't changed. In fact, just for people to be aware, the new development in Sudbury, high density development just over the line, the only reason that was able to occur was because they incorporated a package treatment plan as part of that project.
Right.
So ironically, that was something that was realized because they did make the investment into that infrastructure.
Thank you, Alan. This is so helpful. Do we have any questions on 39 and 40?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
Let's
Carlin.
see. How can the league and citizens in general pressure legislators to respond to the discharge capacity needs? That's one question. And do you want the second one, Alan?
I'll answer that. I think part of the next step is to try to help push the interests of the town forward. I can tell you the town manager is already working fairly aggressively, putting the state on notice, and not just through the regulatory agency, but through the political wheels. I know she's reached out with a letter to the governor, who is touting an interest to see and realize housing development. And I think we've identified the disconnect between increasing density of housing in a community that has constraints on wastewater. So that's a step. But I do appreciate our goal, and I think when we get our consultant on board, is how, what is the best approach for applying pressure? Because Concord is trying to do the right thing. We're not trying to skirt responsibilities, but the real challenge we have is we kind of right-sized our wastewater system back in the 80s. That was when we decided to right-size. A lot of communities built and constructed facilities beyond what their existing need was. And there is a risk of, if you build it, they will come. And then Concord's very sensitive to that. And at the same time, if you don't build it, you can't grow. And that's really, we've been in this bind for 40 years. And we've done well to get to this point, but we really do need to find the next step, and we got to get creative. So my interest is any entity in Concord, like the league, who has a voice and maybe can help us push this initiative over the line with the regulators and maybe the state. We'll circle back with you, but I appreciate the ask.
Thank you, Alan. Robert Hilsinger has his hand raised. Robert?
Helen, you may have answered this question, but I'm wondering if the money that each of us is paying for water and sewer there are two pieces. One is the operation of the facility, and the other is kind of paying forward to take that bite out of that big cost which we're going to hit. And my question is, do you think we should be paying more in looking forward to what that big costs are going to be, and can that be done?
It's a great question. Really, it's the balance of not overburdening a small percentage of town, the third of the existing users, for the benefit of the rest of the town. So the enterprise system that we have is really targeted to maintain the existing infrastructure. If the town wants a different or needs to expand, we do have a fund available. That's a sewer improvement fund that we're contributing to. But if there's more that's needed, I'm sure that will likely be something where the town will have to participate if we're trying to expand that system. But the balance of not overburdening the existing customer to the benefit of the rest of the town, that's where we have to find the sweet spot, I think.
And that's an exquisite answer. Thank you very much. Carlin, is there another answer in the chat box? A question?
The question was, do we know our actual sewer volume, how our actual sewer volume compares with the volume predicted by regulatory formulas? Can credit be claimed for documented lower flow than the formulas expect?
All right, well, I'm going to share the following. The most significant driver for the plus or minus flow that we see at our treatment facility is climate. There is something called inflow infiltration, which is a key component of all municipal systems. Concord, I will say, just for this group, it's important to understand, you'll hear about combined sewer overflows, CSOs, because they're all in the news. There's a lot of regulations and notification requirements affiliated with, in fact, systems that combine stormwater and wastewater. And when flows are low, all the water is treated. And when the stormwater is high, you bypass full-scale treatment. Just to be clear, that's in the news a lot. Concord doesn't have one of those systems. We have a dedicated sewer line. Our stormwater is separate. But even with a dedicated sewer, we do have infiltration of groundwater. We have 100-year-old pipes buried 20 feet deep, below streets that were not intended at the time to be 100% tight. At the time, we were protecting the general public. So our interest was to flush the waste away from the dense populated areas, really not thinking about the adverse impact on the environment. So if it collected a little groundwater, so what? Actually, it just helped it flush better. 100 years later, we now are responsible for every drop that gets to the treatment plant has to be treated to a very high level. So there's a lot of money that's spent to try and tighten the system retroactively. So when the question becomes, where do we stand with our permit? Today, we are doing well. We do spend money in our budget. We have an allowance for investigations and repairs of our sewer collection system. But there's still going to be infiltration no matter what we do. We try and educate people. Please do not connect a sump pump to the municipal sewer system. Your dry basement is compromising other people's, if you connect it to the sewer, that's a capacity obligation. And so education of, that's considered inflow, not infiltration. Infiltration when it seeps in. Inflow is when stormwater is deliberately or not entering into the system. So that's something we try to share. And we have been doing well with our permit because we have been in a regional drought for the past couple of years. We've just got out of it, but I don't know if you recall, but it's been pretty dry. And my understanding is across the state, most systems have been doing well, but basically not as much as because of new use or significant conservation, but because it's been weather patterns have been dry, but that can change. And if it gets particularly wet for an extended period of time, we will have a problem.
Yeah. Alan, we're over time a little bit, and we have the water system, which I know is your favorite topic anyway, is water systems. You have about 2 minutes on water systems. And then we turn to Jason.
Okay.
So,
I'm not going to bring up the slide just to save time. So what you need to know in 2 minutes. There's going to be a lot of public outreach on this in the very near future. In the fall, I think we'll probably have a forum or symposium on our long-range water issues. The biggest challenge we have is our source water quality. And it's not Concord limited. This is a industry-wide dilemma where historically we do a certain amount of treatment at all of our sources of supply. Nagog Pond continues to be a source of supply that in a perfect world would be filtered. We haven't filtered it yet. We have had lots of discussions on trying to move forward with a conventional, a state-of-the-art filtration facility. We ran into a lot of challenges with permitting of this facility. It was in the town of Acton that put significant delays in our plan to filter. We then had litigation issues with water rights issues with the town of Littleton and Acton. Took a couple of years to resolve. And as soon as we were ready to proceed to the next step, we had the cloud of polyfluorinated alkaline substances coming our way, PFAS. And we were aware of this about 2 or 3 years ago. We've tested in the past, but what we've learned is the testing requirements 10 years ago with limits that existed then were too crude. They did not detect the limits that now regulators are concerned about. So we are in a position where we have just heard from EPA that they want to impose standards, Safe Drinking Water Act standards, at limits that are unprecedented, down at 4 parts per trillion. And you can Google that and figure out what that means. But in essence, 4 parts per trillion, we were finding PFAS is everywhere. They call it everywhere. It's omnipresent and it's in the environment. They're finding it in, products that we use daily, but they're coming up with drinking water standards that are so low that most sources of supply are likely going to require some level of treatment within the next 3 to 10 years. And so that is significantly changing our model and identified needs of where we're going to have to spend money, but it's going to be money spent for water quality. That's one area to address PFAS that has only been put on the radar in the last couple of years, but the announcement for the regulations for EPA occurred a month or 2 ago.
Right.
We're not alone. So that's a big issue. Lead service line replacements is another issue that EPA has identified as a priority. You'll hear more from the Water Division on lead service line replacement needs and identification. First inventory and then replacement. So that's going to be a major driver, an area of interest to the community. And I think those are the 2 biggest, most compelling, challenges we're going to be facing moving forward.
Thank you, Alan, so much. And I know water is your most beloved, your most beloved concern. And thank you. And Bob, thank you for joining us in this conversation. And we really appreciate it. Back to your rhododendron, Alan, and back to your day off. So thank you for joining us. And we now have Jason Bulger. And Jason, you have been so wonderfully patient. We're so grateful. And Jason is going to talk with us, first of all, very briefly, about Article 24. Whoops, yes. No.
Yep.
Yep, 24, the light plant expenditures and payment in lieu of taxes. But his big concentration, of course, is going to be on the PEG access. So Jason, thank you. And welcome.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my screen.
And again, thank you for your patience. You've been remarkably gracious.
No problem. Can everybody see?
Yes, it's perfect.
2022 results. So I thought it wouldn't be a good use of everyone's time for me to repeat the presentation that I gave at the Finance Committee hearing, but just to talk a little bit more about some of the initiatives that we're working on and what we've accomplished so far. I'll touch briefly on the revenues and the expenses that we have. So, in general, subscriptions continue to grow at about 5% per year. There's a chart that's coming up. You'll see that with the pandemic, things definitely slowed down. We were unsure if that was because we were kind of reaching saturation, or was it just because the pandemic has kind of shifted some things. But it does appear that the first percentage of Concord was very easy for us to get, and now it's going to be about a 5 to 8% growth year over year. The percent obviously will go down as we get more customers because there'll be fewer remaining, but a steady number each year. So in terms of the financial results, you can see here estimated revenue of 1.57 million. With income of about $250,000. We have been income positive for the last several years. We did hire a broadband manager last year, who's been a very huge help to the team. I'm really proud to be a part of this group because we have some great people who work every day to make sure that this service is running for the community. And we've been working on increasing redundancy in some of our equipment. I wanted to mention that we recently just announced at the Light Board meeting this week the hire of a new telecom technician to replace an individual who had left last year. And so we're really excited about that person. His name is Dan Robinson, starting in just a week and a half. And we have one more vacant position that we'd like to fill, a network engineer. So working on that. And let me just go to the next slide so you guys can just see the revenue sources. Vast majority of our base and broadband is residential. There's a tiny sliver of municipal, and then the other revenue is usually installations or dark fiber leases. You can see here the customer accounts that I alluded to, which were operating or increasing at a relatively steady rate until about 2019, as 2020 rates were affected by the pandemic. we continue to see a year-over-year of about 5% on that. And then here's just the net income and loss statements. You can see that we've been positive for many years and working on repaying some of the initial monies borrowed from the light plant for the build out and capital of the business. And then what we're excited to be doing in this coming year is to make sure that we continue to build on the recommendations of the Fiber Broadband Completion Task Force. They issued a very comprehensive report. I was at many of their meetings, and those individuals spent a lot of their time analyzing the current situation and figuring out how they could expand access to people in Concord. They tackled a lot in there. Every month when I do my broadband update for the light board, I include kind of a tracker of where we are with some of those initiatives. A couple meetings ago, I think in February, I had a dedicated agenda item where I just went over in great detail where we are with some of these things, what we're working on, and we've been making some pretty exciting progress on that. Also, we're looking to fill those remaining vacant positions. We just have the one left, which is exciting. In terms of big projects, we have a couple things. First of all, the core equipment that manages all of the broadband service is due to be replaced. And we're also looking for a new vehicle. So we're trying to prioritize those two items. We'll probably be doing one this year, one the next year. And then we're also working on creating these 5 and 10-year plans. So we have a lot of metrics that we're capturing now that weren't captured previously, which is really helpful. We've been talking to current and former employees about financial estimates and analyses so that we can better plan, putting together capital plans that will help us roll out more fiber to more locations. I just announced at the light board meeting yesterday that we are in talks with Concord Green to figure out how we can get service there, and we've had some really promising feasibility conversations about that.
Oh, that's exciting. I know they've been very eager to be connected.
Yeah, and we're not stopping there, and that's not the only one we're really looking at, but we know we've received a lot of requests for service from residents there, and there are people there willing to work with us and do some sort of design sort of tests to see how things go. So we're looking at every single one of them, and we have our own tracker for anything that's more than 2 residences in a single location. We're tracking to see like which ones do we have access to, which ones do we not, why not, what are we doing to work on that. So we're also working on staff development training. This includes making sure that everybody is up to speed on all the software that we use, and that they use the latest in safety equipment and are fully trained in CPR and all that. We're also working on marketing that we haven't really had to do. Historically, broadband has been kind of a word of mouth thing. We now have a lot of new service tiers. We were just accepted into the Affordable Connectivity Program, which offers qualified residents a subsidy of up to $30 per month. And so we're trying to get the word out on that, on our new speeds, and make sure that we sort of get the low-hanging fruit of maybe residences that have already had fiber installed, so it's right there, and all we have to do is send them a piece of equipment, and reach out to try to get growth that way, which again, historically we had more demand than we could even keep up with. So we want to make sure that continues. Our interest requests are steady and increase every year in the spring as people buy new homes or start thinking about what they want to do. And that's happening again now. But what we want to make sure that doesn't happen is that we just sort of see that peter out. We want to make sure that we're aggressively pursuing those people that want service.
This is so helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And so I think I'll stop there with that and ask if there's any questions related to the broadband Article 24, which is kind of part of the CMLP pilot article.
I have one question in the chat box, Diane.
Okay, Carlin, please.
And it asks for an amplification of what you touched on briefly. How is the low income broadband program going? And I'm curious especially about what's the potential take rate for that program? How many people are eligible for this?
We will never actually know exactly how many people are eligible because some of the criteria can change for people very rapidly. And so we don't know that. What we do know is about how many people are taking the light plant's current electrical rate assistance program. We'll be targeting those individuals specifically. When we did our analysis early on, there were not a lot, fewer than 10, who have Concord Broadband and are also getting the rate assistance from the light plant. So we don't anticipate a huge number, but we want to make sure that all those people at least are aware of it. It might be the reason why, if there's over 100 people on the assistance plan, that only under 10 are currently broadband customers. So adding this service will allow them to maybe get the service. So that would be good for them. And we are anticipating somewhere between 5 and 50 people that might participate. The criteria are on the FCC's website. We've linked to it in our monthly report, and we'll be splashing the broadband page this week with that information so that people know how to get there. We'll be doing targeted email blasts to people who are have provided their email address to CMLP. We'll be doing bill inserts and other ways to get things out, the news and notices and things like that. So we'll be getting the word out as much as we can.
Thank you so much, Jason. And we've squeezed you in terms of time, and I'm very embarrassed by that. But at any rate, we now go on to Article 42 to authorize expenditure of the PEG access and cable related fund. The whole M&M has been just fantastic for our town. So take it away.
Great, thank you. So I came to work with Minuteman Media Network around September of last year, after the public information officer moved into a different role. And it is just such a terrific team of individuals. They've been very resilient despite some departures. As everyone knows, Mark Pauly has recently left. He fortunately is still a part-time employee of the town to assist with the town meetings this year, with the setup of those for both Concord and Carlisle. But they've been just such a pleasure to work with, and they really do remain dedicated to the ethos of getting the story of Concord and Carlisle out and including all the voices of the residents and people here. So it's just a pleasure to work with them. We are working to restore staffing levels and make sure we get people into those roles. I'm really excited to work with the current staff to see what their strengths and interests are and where they might be able to move around in the organization. We also have a media manager position in the new class and comp study that is part of the warrant at town meeting, and will hopefully be approved and will allow us to recruit for that position come July. So let's see, where did my little slideshow advanced thing go? Over here. Sorry about that. So I think I talked a little bit about this, but we are looking at ways to increase involvement with Minuteman Media. It is difficult with our studio at the school right now. People are not really invited to come in the studio during the school day, so they can come once school gets out in the 2 o'clock hour. But we're trying to create more opportunities for the public to come in, borrow equipment, create and produce content, whether it's audio, podcast, video, shorts, recurring segments, things that people do on their own or do with our producers' help. And we're also really excited to help with the 250th celebration. Mark had been attending one of the subcommittee meetings there, and we'll have somebody represent going forward just to stay in the loop with what we can do. We've already done a little bit to help, and we've been in conversations with some others with some upcoming ideas as well. But this is going to be such a huge event for Concord, and we're so excited to bring the expertise and equipment that we have so that we can support the documentation of that, and not just the celebration itself, but the planning and all the work that goes into it. So we're trying to work on covering that story right now. I know that all of the team will be there on Monday to cover the Patriots Day parade and events, and we try to build that library of footage and content so that we can use that as B-roll or as part of producing other content.
Thank you, Jason. That's my subcommittee. So please let me know who's going to be joining it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So another huge effort that's coming up in this coming year is the renegotiation of the franchise agreement with Comcast. I know Carlin knows this in great detail, but our current contract ends in August of next year. And it is a very long process to make sure that we get the adequate public input and that we are in the best position to negotiate a contract that will benefit the town in the greatest way possible. Carlisle is a little bit ahead of us in terms of the timing of their renewal. And so we've been learning a lot from that. And we've been working with a terrific consultant, the Buskey Group, and Sue Buskey, who has been helping guide us through this process. And it's going to take a lot of time to go through inventory of equipment, figure out what the needs are, how we can support what people are looking to do. So this is a big process that's going to be happening in the coming year. We have a couple capital things on the list this coming year, and the biggest ones are to replace the the broadcast equipment that is at the studio. This is the brains of the operation that manages not only the channel, but the live streams, the website, access to videos. And I'm really excited that the new generation, we've had this equipment for 11 years now, and the new generation of equipment is going to allow us to do many things in an automated fashion. So today we may film something and go live, but once we do that, we have to then go massage that file and then send it to this location and then upload it to YouTube and then do this and do that. The new generation will save many steps and allow staff to sort of do all of that at one time, so that when they are done with producing the content, it can automatically trigger certain events. A lot of editing can happen inside the system as opposed to having to download video, re-edit it, re-encode it, and then send it back. So it's just going to save a lot of time, and it will also mean that we'll be able to get content out to people faster. I know people are very anxious to see public meetings, especially, and so having that automatic workflow that if something is airing live, it can also go live to YouTube, or it can automatically get triggered as an upload right after the event. So we don't have to wait till the next morning when staff come in. So this is going to be just really good, and also make sure that we have, equipment that will last another 5 to 10 years. 11 years is definitely longer than we like to see for equipment like that. But we're also looking to replace the equipment at the townhouse, both in the public hearing room and the select board meeting room. We had originally sort of split this into two, and we had an eye on our fund balance, which is pretty healthy at over $1 million. But we have been strongly advised by the Buskey Group that Comcast will look at our fund balance and use that and hold that against us and say, well, if you've got all this money, you clearly don't need any more from us. And we have dire needs to replace equipment in these buildings. And so this is something that was already on the list to be done, and we were trying to stretch it out, but it was a great recommendation by Sue, and something that the PEG Access Advisory Committee supported, that the town supported, and then at the FinCom hearing, they voted to support it. So I'm happy we're going to be able to do all that, in the same year, so we don't have to break it out. It's going to mean we'll be able to actually cover 2 events simultaneously in both of those rooms. It will allow an easier transition, because as you know, some things start as a hearing and then go into the select board meeting room. Other events start in the select board meeting room and go to the public hearing room. And there's always a disconnect of several minutes while staff have to move equipment around. And this will just allow for a really seamless transition so that everything can be managed from one location, and allow better visibility into those rooms, and maybe even allow those staff covering those meetings to participate a little bit more and help out maybe on Zoom or do other things like that related to the meeting. Recently, the town, or Minuteman Media, and the schools have split the bill to upgrade a lot of equipment at Ripley, but there's a little bit more we have left to do, including cameras. We got it working now, but once we hooked up all this new equipment, we realized that the camera quality for these cameras that are very old is pretty poor and holding us back. So there's a few cameras that we need to replace and a few other things, a new computer to drive the Zoom meetings. So we'll be doing that upgrade as well. And then just some editing computers that will allow us to train people, and also for our videographers and staff to edit meetings and other content before we push it out. So those are the kind of big capital.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry to.
No, I understand.
Do you have one last comment you'd like to make? And I don't think we're going to have time for questions right now. So if you have one last comment, Jason.
No, I mean, we can wrap it up there. That's fine.
And what you have done is to allow us to see the imagination of all the work your group is doing. And I'm sure you have the support of everyone in town, because this has been an invaluable gift to our town, as have you. So thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us this morning. This is a league video. It will be seen on our website. You can see the April 7th one also on our website. And as Jason has suggested, there may be a hiccup between this filming and what is actually visible, but it will be up on the M&M and on the league website very soon. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Thank you, Carlin. Thank you for doing the chat box. Thank you, Linda Ziffern and Nancy Confrey for covering the tech operations in the background. And I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you all.